All right, so this was released today, this morning, to help verify what
Okay.
we're going to be going into. So let's just hear what Jason has to say here.
And I've heard you say that everything in the matrix is an exact reflection of what you already are.
Well, that's because everything in the matrix, you can only experience it and perceive it because it's happening through you. So, so you being, and I can explain that in a very simple way. Just like you would go on any website or web page on the computer, if you right click on any website, you'll see a button that pops up that says view page source. If you click view page source, it will open up, and I encourage everybody to do this, and it will open up a new window on your screen that shows a massive code. And what we once experienced as a Facebook page or a YouTube page or whatever it is, we suddenly see that it's not the page that we're experiencing on the screen. It's actually a code that's made of numbers and symbols and all these different characters that are put together with no spaces in between them. It's a long code that doesn't end. And somehow on the screen, we still see a space between the like button and the comment button, and so on and so forth. And the reason why that's so important is because the computer in and of itself is the mechanism that decodes that code to give us the experience of the Facebook page. If you had a different computer, you wouldn't see the Facebook page the same. If the computer were to decode that code differently, you'd see a completely different thing on your screen. Now, how does that translate to application? Well, that's how we work. How do we see? Our eyes decode vibrations in the air into light, into perception. Our ears decode vibrations in the air into sound, so we can hear. Our skin does the same, so we can feel, and our nose does the same, so we can smell. And all of these things are different tools and devices in a way that are decoding the code. Now, if you can shift the device, you shift the way that you decode the code, and therefore you perceive things differently. That's how awareness works. Your awareness, as your awareness changes, what does ascension actually mean? Ascension means, well, on the surface, you're going to start perceiving things differently. You'll start being more aware of things that you weren't aware of before. You may begin to start seeing things that you couldn't see at a different level of awareness because you're tuning into other resonances. But as you tune into other resonances, you're actually changing the way that your devices decode the code, and you see things differently. So all in all, we are creating everything, because the only reason why we're perceiving in the first place is because this matrix, this code, is flowing through us. And we're the conduits and the mediums that allow this code to be decoded as what we call reality. In other words, what's on the computer screen. And when we understand that completely, not just through conceptual understanding, but through experience, the next step that we'll get to is, all right, we understand how those things work. Now, how do we change the code? Because if you know anything about building a website, you'll know that you build the website based on how you code it. And if you change the code, you change the website. And that's where conscious manifestation comes in at a much higher level of awareness. And as we move through our ascension process, we will learn how these codes work. But if we're given that too soon, it's almost like giving the code to apple.com or youtube.com to somebody that has ill intentions with the website. They can do harm. And right now, and I'm using those companies because they're some of the biggest companies in the world.
Sure.
So you're talking about a universal code here. You give us that on the collective level too soon, where we're not ready to be responsible with that and how to use it, we can destroy a lot of things here. And that's why I think things like the pyramid code and things like rays of light and their codes are not being released right now, because we're not yet at the point where we can handle them in a responsible way.
So for me, when I saw that, I realized that what I need to do is that when I'm sharing, I need to start from mother only. I can't go into father's code yet. Because
how do you do that?
Well, you easily do that. You teach Paleo Hebrew.
You mean just
Yes.
the beginners?
Yes, because
Oh,
you
okay.
can, you can go through just the words with the letters and be able to extrapolate much more without going into father, like what is the prefix, what is the suffix, what is the root, what is every letter is spelled with other letters, and what the gematria is and the words hidden within. I can't do that yet, because we're and you'll see why. In fact, when I go into the wise and foolish virgins in the verse that we're looking at, it totally spells it out. And so I have a lot more peace about now where to start to be able to present this to people. I mean, I know I can go into more detail at the beginning about the Aleph, because Aleph is everything. And there are certain elements of Aleph that I can share, but some of the deeper revelation has to come later, once once we've worked through mother first. Huge principle here.
I can comprehend that, because it's really been um, swimming around in me since you introduced. You felt like there was 3 steps or 3 levels, and it's not like it's all clear yet or everything, but it's just like really um, going somewhere.
Yeah.
Inside of me. And because how something will just grab hold of you, and then your spirit begins to start revealing it. So, and that was that. And so in connecting that to what you're saying now, you can't undo, it's the cart before the horse for
Exactly.
all of them.
Exactly.
And so mother has to be taught, and they have to, you can't, and so then even the end part, you learn mother, you learn father, and then there's still, it's that quickening, it's that heart, that has to take place for you to become whole, for you to become, elf, for you to become
Exactly.
that. So
Yes, that is the revelation of the power that comes from becoming the Queen of Heaven, that has married, the male and female component together in remembering as becoming Elohim, because we went through the forgetting. But the only way that can be done is through the system of duality. And that's what mother and father is all about. Yod He Vav He is about learning in the system of duality to render it clear. And
yes,
so if you only have one side of the equation, you haven't solved the problem, because
exactly.
the problem is our forgetting. And so
Yeah.
when people go through the left-hand side, what they're doing is they're seeking power only, instead of being stripped bare and rebuilt for the responsibility of the power that is being given by
Yeah.
Father.
Well, actually, the fact that society and people are in the condition that they're in is simply because they don't have that first step. They
Exactly.
don't have mother. And
Exactly.
so they can't build on that. So they never arrive, or they never get where they need to get.
Yes.
People can never really get through to them.
Right.
And you just go round and round and round.
And this is why we have power happy government officials that are trying to direct our ship as a people group, because they never went through the bare stripping process of learning humility and teachability, so that when they were given the power, that they wouldn't serve self, that they would really lead from behind and lift up the people, instead of doing it the way they've been doing it, because it doesn't solve any problems. In fact, everything that they are doing is causing greater division.
Yeah.
There's no unification in there. And that's because it's a service to self-orientation. Our whole government structure, worldwide is that way. And because these leaders, this is why the pharaohs, the extensive training that they went through, and why, even if you take a look at, so Moshe being raised within Pharaoh's courts, he went through the initiation process. He was taught as Pharaoh. And there's many people that believe that he was Akhenaten. And then when you have Joseph, okay, so now let's fast forward to Joseph. So, or behind, Joseph's before Moshe, but Joseph was instructed by his father. And there's, if you trace all of that back, really, who was really educating him is that he got a lot of his education from his wives. Because if you look at the sacred writings, Laban understood the principle of one love. He instructed his daughters in the way of one love. They took the Asherim with them because it was their reminder of their instruction. They were teaching Jacob. Jacob was being stiff-necked about it, right? Until he wrestled Hillel. He wrestled the angel Hillel, that then gave him the revelation of the quickening of everything that his wives were trying to teach him. And then he wanted to have the swearing upon his seed that all of the generations that would come through him would be able to carry that mantle. So in teaching, who did he teach? Well, I believe that Rachel instructed Joseph and Benjamin in the ways, and that they were continued in the education because they took interest of it. The other brothers did not, because they were of Leah. Well, Rachel was the one that really honed into it. She instructed from 0 to 12, Benjamin and Joseph, and then Jacob, Israel, taught his sons. So then when Joseph was taken into Egypt, and that whole thing happened and he was raised up, Pharaoh understood that Joseph had already gone through that initiation process. That's why he was able to be put into that leadership position as the viceroy of Israel, of Egypt, because he had already gone through the training. He had already gone through the initiation process because his mother and father instructed him in the ways so that he could lead from the place of service to others and not service to self, in order to sustain the life of the people, because he was really acting as judge, as a gardener, really, that he was sustaining life for everyone because he was serving others and not himself. Yes. So, there's something to be said about that. And that's why the rulers of this world have not gone that way, because they haven't, like we were saying, they haven't gone through the way of mother. They were not stripped bare. Joseph definitely got stripped bare. Pride was knocked out of him. And that was the only way that he could be raised up, was his beast ego had to be dealt with first. And you would think that being sold into slavery the first time would have done it, but then he found himself in prison a second time. But I think it was because his anointing was so big that he really had to learn. He had to learn, like, the humility that comes from mother and then the meekness that comes from father. So he had to be sold into slavery once, and then he was in prison for the second go around because, he had to be raised up into the power of meekness. And so we're going to go into this verse now and take it into the wise and foolish virgins so that we can see what's really going on here. And I think you'll find it fascinating. So I'm going to turn off my camera because I'm being annoyed as heck of seeing all this funky stuff. Gosh, that's what I get for playing with things. Not knowing what I'm doing. So I'm going to turn my camera off. Silly goof. Come on. Nope, I don't want to rename. Let's stop the video for me. There we go. Now I'm going to do a screen share and we're going to go into the verse.
Okay.
So Matthew 25, where we've been, and we are going to be looking at verse 8 today. We will go through a little bit of a review of where we were at last time. But this verse that we're looking at today is, "But the foolish one said to the wise, give to us from your oil, for behold, our lamps are gone out." So when we were looking at this last time, we were talking about that this was an after moment of when the meeting happened with the teaching shepherds of light that were revealed. So verse 7, they were dealing with what happened afterwards, and that part of it was that it was going to end up waking them up, those who thought they were standing ones, but they really didn't, because they didn't have that connection on the inside to source. and that they were actually going to be in the place where they were suffering a mental and physical decline, pining away because they didn't make this cut per se. You know, they were meant to be the bride and they were meant to be crowned, but they were actually revealed that they were still in their fallen flesh nature of the lower nature. And so this whole process that they were going to, this message was going to come back around to them one more time, to be revealed to them. The
Now I see it.
instruction, yeah, the instruction on the inside to help them deal with their fallen flesh nature. And that this idiom and this last word about being restored was that they needed to have their net mended to be able to receive this, to be prepared to restore, to be put right because of their fallen flesh nature, and that they would be made totally aware of it. And that this was also in connected to like the chamber, the intimacy chamber, in order to restore their lamp and their light again, because they'd missed the calling to be activated in their light. So now, in coming to this next one, this next verse about the foolish saying to the wise, give us of your oil. When we take a look at the first word here, it's amar. That is the root, aleph memresh. So this speak, declare, speech, whatnot, is the root, but it has a fallen noon. So in regards to the foolish here, it still has something to do with the fallen noon, that they're speaking in their fallen flesh state. This isn't a risen state. This is their fallen flesh nature. So the last two letters here, the resh noon on the end, this is very interesting because Ken has been looking at this and he's been talking about this resh noon. It has to do with a piercing cry, and it's connected to, this is connected to the ostrich, meaning to emit a really aggressive sound. But the root of it is resh noon noon, and it means to shout for joy. Meaning that as leaders taking the spiritual path, while they are in their flesh suit, they still had a risen nature that they went through, and they're supposed to be shouting for joy right now, but they're not, because they're in the fallen flesh. There is no risen noon. Something was missing. And so they are declaring and speaking here. And again, we talked about mother and it being bitter, right? Mother's bitter process. They're actually in the place of bitterness in their fallen flesh because of something that did not happen to them. This word also means to be called, and it's a Hebrew idiom meaning the question is the answer. So the question as to why did we not make it? Why are we still in fallen flesh? Is because it has something to do with mother and her teaching that was meant to raise them up to be a first fruit leader, but it didn't happen. And now we have the word, which is also Dean, has to do with a now principle, and now and judgment. And we've already talked about that there's judge, judgment, strive, tread out, a quarrel. But really that the dalet noon from the root of this is meant to be a door of life. And that this judging is one who restores to life to bring a pleasant and righteous life to the people. So this judgment that has come is simply, it's a measure that they are finding within themselves. It's not anything that anybody does on the external to say you didn't qualify. The works are revealed right where you're at, whether you did the works or you didn't. Because the work indeed of our hand, the yod on the inside, is letting us know that judging comes from us. It's the work indeed of our own hand to judge ourselves on the inside, not to judge other people, but where are we at? Where are we weak on the inside that we need to deliver ourselves from? Because really, that is the door to life that reveals to us how to do it, gives us the power, means, and direction if we go on the inside to look at the places where we're weak, which again is about judging ourselves and not other people. Because if you judge other people, it's really a reflection of that which you need to deal with on the inside. And we've talked about that many times, about this being a mirror when we try to judge on the outside and we don't take it to the inside. That's where the power resides, is being able to take it on the inside. Does that making sense so far? All right. So in going back to this, now we have the word woe, alas, woe, and behold. And the root is hey vav. Okay, well now we have the noon. So I'm sorry, the hey noon. No, let me back up. It's hey vav is the root. The vav is not there.
Oh,
What do we see instead of the vav?
the noon.
We see the noon, yod, noon,
Yod.
right? Yeah. So there is no vav. They didn't connect to the revelation. So this is really what we would look at, has to do with the spelling or the constituent letters that make up the symbol noon, but there's still no vav. There's supposed to be a vav here, and it's yod. So what this is saying, so remember, the question is the answer. So what happened here? They behold, there's a woe here, alas. The revelation is that there was a spiritual path to be taken that would give us the power to overcome our fallen flesh. But somehow they didn't connect to it. So the answer is, in this now moment of revealing, in this judging moment of when the teaching shepherds of light are revealed, that the foolish are understanding that something is being revealed to them that they didn't connect to, that meant to give them the power, because this is on the Father's side. The Father's power was given to them to deal with their fallen flesh if they would have taken the spiritual path by going through the door on the inside to reveal to them. That's the whole purpose of the power, is to deal with the fallen flesh, beast, ego, nature. Now we have the word silly or foolish. It's really interesting to see how all this progresses, because I think we looked at it last week about how the foolish, the very first time the foolish shows up in scripture in this verse, in I think it's verse 2, the foolish have the fallen noon on it, right? Well, they have a tav aleph here. So they have the covenant of the Father. There's something marked different about them, and they understand and have been and have that comprehension of the oneness unity. But they still have fallen flesh.
Which shows you that the fallen flesh isn't all dealt with mother.
Yeah, and you'll see this as we get down a little bit further. That's what's so fascinating about this, and why I was saying that in order to have these teachings go forth, one really needs to have a mastery of mother's teaching before they move on. Because, the purpose is that we would be wed, that would be crowned as the bride. So this is really the signet ring, the power of the signet ring that comes from the covenant of the Father, walking in the oneness principle, because this is something that we've gone through, so that the foolish, to act foolishly or to be foolish, but there was also the other side of it that meant to regard and consider. And so the process of this, and this again, find this fascinating. So in Hebrew, the sheen, which is the seen, because the dot's on the left-hand side, dealing with fire's father, father's fire, was meant to deal with us totally in our wholeness, to burn up everything if we chose to be tamed and yoked to the instructions of light, because it's meant to make us wise. But if we don't go through the process of the consuming fire, and we expect the signet ring and everything that goes with it, the crown, the authority that comes with being the queen, as we're going to see as it continues to go a little bit further, because they're lacking meekness, there's something that was missing, in that perpetuity, there's something that went awry here. And when you take a look at, and this is what I thought was really interesting, I didn't catch this the first time through, and the Spirit said you need to go back to the original position of what made them wise and what made them foolish. So these foolish now are coming to the wise. But look at, so this is how it was originally presented to us as the wise, but look at what happened to them now. Stop highlighting that there. They are a teacher. They are a teaching shepherd of light. This means that the wise have the ability to teach this, but they have become a teacher of mother. They are a teacher of light being represented as mother. The foolish don't have it. They're missing it. This is also a representation of light. They don't have it. They should, right? Because it's complemented right here, but they don't have anything in front of that ring. They can't teach. And I thought of when Paul has written, you ought to be teachers by now. Lamed. But the position that the wise put themselves in, you can see right here, Yod, Mem, Nun. And it means, it's a Hebrew word that means choose the right. Choose the right hand. Go to the right. So the wise decided to go to the right hand path first, Yamin, because that's where they found life, where they were tamed. So again, connecting it to what I shared the other day about Chava, finding life, finding the mother of all living, filling their cup, taming themselves, having gone to the right hand path. Now they are the teachers of life. They filled their cup and they are the Yod Mem. They are now the fullness of the Queen of Heaven, marked in the covenant as one. But they now teach. And it's interesting because in going through the law of one material, there's a principle that is learn, teach, teach, learn. Meaning that as you learn something, you therefore then turn and teach it, which then cements that which you learned. That's the only reason why people choose to teach, is because it's really a conviction of that which they learned, cementing it. So these teachers of light are turning around and are teaching that which they learned that brought them light. It is now being cemented in them, having power on the inside through the living water teachings marked in the covenant of Father that are of one. So now look at this. So the foolish are asking the wise to give. Now, this is so amazing. Oh, I did want to say something here too that I found was interesting. I'm glad that I should have highlighted this. This life and death that I just highlighted here, Chet is the letter that means life. Mem Tav is the word for death. These are the teachers that understand, the wise that comprehend life and death. And they've been given power over death. In fact, I'm going to flip it back because I'm having a hard time. So here are the two letters that represent power. So here's life, and they've grasped a hold of the power over death. Life and death. Here are the wise. And look at what's on the front and what's on the back. Lo, the instruction in the way of one. The teachings of the way of one. Because life and death have been unified into one. It's experience. So these wisdom teachers, they have understood the process of life and death because they grasped a hold of the power that gave them the ability to have power over death. And if you remember, if we're going to connect something here, when we were talking about them in the grave, we had two different forms for sleep. And one of them had to do with like being in the grave. The other one had to do with like a sleepy and a slumber that came over them, a sleepiness.
Mhm.
The wise have the power over the grave. That's what this is saying. They have power over death. So going to the right hand is teaching you the correct principles in order to have this staff of authority, which is huge to be able to have the staff that are the mother of all living, that have grasped with power necessary to overcome death. And so the foolish are saying, give to us from your oil. And look at this word give. It's supposed to be yod, hey, bet. So give, grant, allow, place, set. And it's a Hebrew idiom meaning fruit and yield. So with the yield, they yield fruit, they produce fruit, and they bear fruit. It's also a letter and to deliver a letter. But the yod is not on the front side. They are wanting power of the Father. Now this is it's kind of, this is stirring me when I'm sharing this. They are telling the wise, give us, but they don't want the power that comes from mother because the hay is missing. It's supposed to be right here. They don't want mother's power. They want father's power. And see, the wise have power on the inside. It's neither on the front or the back side. It's not on the prefix or the suffix. They have the power on the inside of them, which means they have the power of source creator on the inside. So the foolish are understanding and see there's no power within them, not on the inside, not as a creator. So they're saying, give to us the Father's power here. But when you look at it a little deeper, we have the word bet yod nun, which means to discern. So the wise, they're being requested, we want this revelation of how to build through the Father's power while we're still in our fallen flesh. But the wise are saying, I need to separate out and understand and I need to have discernment and see what kind of fruit is being produced by those who are asking. What kind of fruit is being produced and what kind of fruit are they bearing? Because they're asking for power, but they don't want mother. They don't want mother's teaching because mother's teaching strips them bare and exposes themselves to get them to the right hand path, which means that they would choose serving others instead of serving self. And again, we have the lamed, the teaching instructions of light, while they're in the fallen flesh. So they want the power that comes with the lamed, which is really interesting because the lamed by itself, it means the rod of the teacher, and it means to prick, sting, incite, and goad. And when it's by itself, well, actually, when it's added as a prefix, it has these meanings: unto, toward, at, into, belonging, written by. To, but it has a noon on the backside. So this is the rod of the teacher given to the fallen because they chose not to go the way of mother. And the reason why they want that is because the wise have the power over death. They found they are the mother of all living. They've been grasped a hold of the power over death in instruction in the way of one. But that is not what these foolish want. They want to have perpetuity. progeny. They want the seed of life, but they want it in the fallen flesh. So they want the teachings while they still stay in their fallen flesh.
Which we can look all around us and see that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So they want to have the perpetuity while in the fallen flesh. They want the
So
power.
their power is actually destructive.
Exactly.
I mean, maybe it always isn't, but it would ultimately, I think.
Well, if they're not looking to deal with their flesh, beast, ego nature,
Mm-hmm.
and they're choosing not to take that risen path of spirituality, because that's really what the beginning of this verse is talking about, is they're like, okay, so we're in the fallen and we want what you have, but they're not willing to go through the right hand first of mother, because
Mm-hmm.
that stripping process is meant to humble us
Mm-hmm.
and to expose us in order for us to clothe ourselves properly so that we can steward the power, which is why I shared that Jason Shurka video,
Yeah.
because we don't want to give it too early. And so even the next word, it's interesting. I did a little deeper dive on this word. It comes from who and what, and it means from, out of, by, part, from, and it's a comparison as than. It also is the Hebrew word for manna, but this word right here means, it denotes separation. And so when I went in a little deeper, it means to apportion, a part, a musical chord. And the definition of apportion is divide and allocate and assign. Divide into portions. Well, the portions are mother and father. So if they're wanting to have the instructions to be able to have eternal life while in the fallen flesh suit, while they're in the waters of chaos.
Makes me think about, I mean, because I know you're going to go into the wheat and tares after this.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, you wonder how that's going to play out as far as, you don't want mother.
Yep.
And you want the power.
Yep.
And so just thinking of us as instructors, how it'll weed out who's serious and who isn't, but do we still teach them?
No.
Because
No.
they're terrors, and it says don't don't pluck them up, or you'll pluck up the leave them in there and let them be. I mean, I'm just wondering how that's going to play out with the wheat and tares, is what I'm saying.
Well,
Because,
it's really, I think the reason why the Spirit wanted us to go through the progression of that was to be able to lay this foundation out here. We started with 144,000, and now we're going to the wise and foolish virgins, and then we're going into the wheat and tares, because of the progression of understanding the responsibility of, if we are adopting and becoming a door of revelation for people, where we open this revelation up to them and then being able to instruct them. This is why this was so huge with this word, as the teachers, the teaching shepherds of light who have become it, they must have discernment, because there's a level of responsibility in which the teaching shepherds of light, when they carry both portions of mother and father, of what they're releasing. And that's why the wise, look what it is here. They're teaching shepherds of mother. Become one with father's teaching, but first and foremost, they're instructing in the way of mother. And it's up to them to have the revelation through the discernment of what they're instructing if they're dealing with people who are in the fallen flesh. That is their responsibility. Because these teachings are to be separated out, because again, mother is first, because she's within the waters of chaos, which deals with the fallen flesh. That's why our daily manna in the beginning needs to be like the Paleo Hebrew representation of the letters, because that's what's going to start us to be able to navigate through the chaos. And father, the mem sofit, is hidden behind mother. Because if you're still dealing with the fallen flesh nature, hello, teaching shepherd of light, you must have discernment of what you go through in your teachings before you release the deeper, powerful teachings of father, which then can manipulate the code in the matrix by changing you. Because you can manipulate people quite easily with this. So there's a huge responsibility for the teaching shepherd.
It is, and you can discern it, but
Yes.
then not real sure how you would handle it. It would probably be individually, but you would have to say you don't have mother, and so you can't move on to father, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm going to show something here too with the disciples, because I found that very interesting to take a look at the progression of the word disciple and who was following Yeshua and what his standards were. And
Sure.
we'll do that after we finish this here. So when we get into so now they're asking for oil, right? Well, we already discussed that Mashach is the root for Mashiach, and Mashach, in its root, means to smear, anoint, anointed, to measure and be measured. That is just Mashach. But look at, this is so interesting. This is Kaf Yod Nun that is added on the suffix side. And this shows that they want to grasp a hold of the power while they're in the fallen flesh. Now, this is what was above. Mashacha, so again, having gone through the living water teachings, the purifying fire, where they found life, Chava to the Chet, where now they have marked with a covenant, finding the way of one. This is the Mashacha, this is the Mashiach anointing, the Christ anointing in the oneness unity. But that's not what's going on here. They have no desire for oneness unity because they are actually service to self. They have no desire to become one. They just want to grasp a hold of the power that Father gives them while they're in the fallen flesh. And that's why the teaching shepherd of light, why the wise are like, I'm not giving you of my oil. It has nothing to do with them not having enough. They have the discernment to see you are not ready for it because you only want the power in this fallen material world. That is huge. Now, to take this to make it a resolve, it should be kun, which means they have tamed themselves. They are standing in meekness with the Father while they're in the flesh. And this suffix, when you look at what this word means, it means to be firm, to be right. So thinking of the right hand path, to be established, secure and enduring and stable, to be erect, to be set up. All of this, establish, fix, prepare, apply, appoint, proper, and prosperous. So even looking at the word proper, without standing and having the piercing that comes from being connected to Father in meekness, they don't want the meekness. They don't want power under their control. They want the raw power while they're in the flesh suit. And so these wise, now we have, lo and behold, they're saying to them, you must go through the door. You can't skip this process. You need to go on in the inside, which is dealing with your heart condition. On the inside, you need to have it revealed to you through the Spirit, the process of becoming one. So they're saying without the Spirit breath, you need to go through the door of revelation that's going to reveal to you your weak and feeble nature, because you are weak and feeble because you don't want to have the oneness principle. It needs to be revealed to you. And again, they just want the power given to them without entering into the process of becoming one. So this is really, again, this whole verse is the wise and the foolish is service to others and service to self. This is huge to have this being played out for the understanding of, especially even connecting it to the law of one material. It's like, Well, it's written all in here. Oh my gosh, that's what this whole parable is.
Mm-hmm.
So then let's take a look at these last three words here. So the wise are telling him, you need to go through this door to reveal to you the revelation of us being one. That's what you need to do. And the root of the next word, meaning to go out, quench, and extinguish, to expire and dry up. This is amazing. It is saying through here, you need to know the power of filling your cup with the meekness of Father. Because dalet ein, many times the word to know, yada, again, yada, you normally would have a yod on here, the power of mother. You want to know the power of Father, but we're saying that in order to do that, you need to be tamed to the meekness principle, because that vav has been added on the suffix side. That's not part of the root. So again, they're saying, look, you don't have meekness. You don't have power under control. And we're saying that you need to go through the door so that you can see intimately what you need to do to get tamed. Because the kaf also means to tame. You need to tame yourself through the languages and stand in meekness with the Father. You want the power, but you don't want it to be under meekness. And so when we have the next word here, so these teaching shepherds are going to reveal to them how to connect in meekness to Father while they're in their fallen flesh. That's the teachers, they just keep pointing it out. You need to have meekness. You can't be walking it in the service to self. You need to have power under control first while you're in the flesh. And this is what's so amazing to me. Look at how the lamp, so again, this is the foolish asking the wise, and this is the condition of their lamp. This is the way the lamp was written before. This is the way their lamp looks now. Can you see what they're missing?
Well, they're missing the hay.
They're missing the yod in the hay.
Yod in the hay.
So what is this?
You just went off. Oh, okay. There. Okay. Yod in the hay. Right.
So the yod hay, it's supposed to be dalet, yod hay, yod noon. Yod
Oh,
hay is the beginning part of the tetragrammaton. Yod hay is mother.
okay.
Hay, vav hay.
Right.
And because they don't have yod hay, they don't have mother. Look at what they have left. Judgment.
Mm.
They have judgment.
Yeah.
Judgment has come upon them
Mm.
because they didn't grasp the way of yod hay, mother. They didn't want to have anything to do with it because mother was going to strip them bare, because the lamp in its root has two olives in it, aleph, dalet, aleph. The whole process of a lamp that burns is one that has oneness with mother, which is the door to Father. And they don't want to go through mother, but they want to grasp a hold of the power. So since they refused mother's teaching, all they get now is judgment.
Mm.
So I share that because I was wrestling, like I said, how do I present this? And the only way I can present this is by going through mother first, the paleo teachings of the letters. I can't go into the deep. I can share revelations. People can learn and see that there's something here. But when I start teaching, it has to go through mother before I teach them how to fully extract through Father, because of the level and the responsibility that are given to those who teach, that they have to have discernment. They have to have discernment of why people are wanting the Father's teaching. Because if they don't demonstrate the mother's golden rule, if they haven't demonstrated how to deal with the painstaking process of going through mother's teachings and being able to rightly divide the words to get the revelations out just through her lens, then they're trying to seek something other than the process of what is necessary for their becoming. Which then leads me to the last thing I want to share. Look at this. This is the word for disciple.
Mm.
This is the full maturation of disciple. But in the process of when the disciples were following Yeshua, this is what is written predominantly most of the time. So the root of disciple is lamed, to instruct and to teach. So when they were following after Yeshua, this is beautiful. They had the mark of mother already. They met her measurement standard. They were marked with the golden rule. They already understood mother's teaching.
That's why they were chosen.
Yes.
Mhm.
And so they already had the understanding of the basic Paleo Hebrew plus the golden rule measurement, because they were instructed in those ways. And then power was given to them on the inside, where the power to go through the inside to deal with their weak and feeble nature that was instructing them. The power, means, and direction by the work and deed of their hand. So in other words, taking mother's teachings, which gave them the power on the inside to continue to deal with their fallen flesh, and they connected to Father in meekness, and it was revealed to them his teaching, which then gave them the power. But look at meekness came first. They were walking in meekness first before the fullness of the revelation could be given to them of the Father's teaching, which then gave them power.
Mhm.
So this is telling us the correct way of being taught. It must go through mother first.
Mhm.
And then the end result.
And they really weren't given any power until Yeshua was out of the picture.
That's right.
Yeah.
Because this verse right here, this is more about Yeshua was sharing with them that the process is becoming one. The work and the deed, Yod Dalet, of your hand is to become one. And this is where I pulled up Luke 6, verse 40. The disciple than his master is not greater, but every man who is perfect shall be as his master. And I thought it was interesting to see that the word that they were talking about with master is rabbah. So think of like rabbi, right?
Mhm.
Master, that's really what rabbi is. But this is one who is multiplied within them, revelation. They are the leader who have built themselves and will be revealed as having multiplied the greater revelation through Father's teaching. And when it says about perfect, it's this word right here, gamar, but it means one who is mature.
Mhm.
They are one who is mature as their master. And so we have the instruction right here of the way of one, the work and deed in becoming one. That is the measure that we do to become mature. And then it has already the spiritual path. They started out by taking the spiritual path that revealed to them so they could connect on their inside the principle of one. So it's important for us to be able to see these things. Why the teaching shepherd of light needs to discern where they're at. Because again, this is disciple the nations, right? Disciple the people through these teachings. Is the teacher must first see that they've qualified through the first mark, and that they're willing to be walking in meekness when it comes to the revelation of the Father that brings them the power. Because that means that they're tamed and they're yoked. They're not trying to take the power for themselves, which is, I had no idea, honestly, that this parable was going to take us, that was truly the difference between the foolish and the wise. I did not realize that what was being shared here was that they were trying to grasp a hold of the power without going through mother first. I had no idea. And it was, I don't know.
Yeah. No, I didn't either. That was all a different way of teaching it completely. So, yeah.
Oh, but you wouldn't see it in English. That's the thing.
No.
You have
Mm-mm.
you have no idea. I got my funky
But
finger.
even the law of one, it gives you the idea that very few people choose serving self, that they end up, most people will choose serving others. But I think scriptures kind of say the opposite of that, that most will choose to do it without mother. But it doesn't mean, I guess, that they can't come around to eventually, after they go through enough stuff,
Oh,
deciding they're
absolutely.
missing something and they have
Yeah.
to do the mother.
Well, the
You know,
way that Law 1 talks about it is that eventually they get to the place where they're wanting more and more power, but they can't be given any more until they go back and go through the right hand path, which is activating their heart chakra. And so they try to pass it, and that's what they are looking for, is the power to control and manipulate by jumping over
Yeah.
a step, by not activating their heart chakra, not having that power within. And again, if you don't do that, you are really lacking, and you don't have access to the creator power as a creator. So they control and manipulate those who have connected to their heart, because they are the ones that are creators, as creator, connected to the source of their power through their heart chakra, and the others choose not to, and they control and manipulate them so they can take their power without having to go through the right process of the right hand path that would humble them and teach them. They're like, I don't want this, I just want all the power, and I'm going to use and abuse and take it from those, because I can see the path that they've gone on. I don't want it, I just want the power. And so I had no idea that this verse was going to take us there. It was very shocking when I saw that, especially when I saw that the lamp, they were missing the yod hey. I was like, oh my gosh, wow, it changed the narrative. It totally changed the narrative. And it did validate that the harvest is based on service to self and service to others. You know, the way the law of one presents it, they have to have like 95% of their life has to be based on serving themselves. 95%. That is extreme. That's like selfishness steroids.
Yeah.
And that's for them to qualify for
That's
their
what I mean. So that would eliminate a small remnant. Most people will turn and learn eventually.
But
Yeah.
in order to be harvested on service to others, you have to at least have 51% of service to others. That's the number, 51%. So if they're trying for service to self and they don't hit the 95%, that's a big swing between 95% and 51%. If they're all trying to do the service to self, and they don't, and let's say they hit it at 90%, they've missed that mark. So this is very interesting here. This is very interesting. This is just a now revelation. I'm going to have to process this, but I'm going to share this because I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it very strongly. The mark on the Father's side can also be given to those who have the power of the Father, who have entered into the left-hand path, that equate and have the power that comes from Father. So the tav on the suffix side, if it's not balanced with the tav on the front side, that could be the marker of service to self, because of the power that comes from Father. Because really, that is a level of affluent influence that needs to be rightly balanced by Mother, of serving others. But there's huge power. So you think about the power of how these elected officials get into office, right? They have lots of charisma, they get elected, but they're not balanced. So they come across as having all this authority, but it's to serve themselves. So unless they have found, as being a teaching shepherd on the mother side that finds life, the power of life and death, the power over death, those that are marked with the Father's covenant have never found life.
Yeah.
They just live in death and they promote death. And that's why they steal the energy from those who have found life, because they're literally walking in death. It's like, it's really interesting to begin to contemplate these things because of what it means when we dig these things out to expand our consciousness, to take in greater revelations, to comprehend the matrix that we're living in and why things are the way they are, and why the level of responsibility is shouldered upon the teaching shepherds to parcel and portion these teachings out responsibly. It's interesting because looking at one of the last like the Star Wars series, when you take a look at what happened with Luke Skywalker when he was teaching Han Solo and Princess Leia's son, and he ended up failing him as an instructor, and so he ended up turning to the dark side to get his power. And it was like, because Luke Skywalker did something, because of the responsibility that he didn't appropriately discern. He saw something that was in him that scared him based on his own fear, Luke Skywalker's own fear, because the power that was in Han Solo's son was a very familiar wrestle of duality that he himself had. He didn't remember that, but that was the same wrestle that his father had, and his father turned out to be Darth Vader. So he improperly discerned, was going to try to kill the son of, I can't remember his name right now. I feel bad that I don't remember his name, but he was wanting to end his life because he was afraid that he was going to turn into like another Darth Vader. And because his action, because the authority that he had and what he did caused him to turn anyway. So the authority that is given to a teaching shepherd of light is a huge responsibility, and we have to be careful about administering these codes to people to see if they're ready for them because of the responsibility.
And we all have that tendency to find the shortcut and to find the quick fix, because we live in a society that absolutely thrives in it, and
Absolutely.
it's all fast based, and
I call it the microwave society.
Absolutely. And so, I mean, I think there's a whole huge people group that really don't, I mean, their heart is to serve others, but they've been trained in take shortcuts, get there as quick as you can, you know,
Right.
and because it comes at you at every level. So,
and so part of that is being able to understand patience.
yeah.
And so even on the fast track, what we have shared before, and we've dug out through Esther, and I don't remember exactly what verse it was in the book of Revelation, it shows that it's 6 months of mother and 6 months of father. And that is if you're a serious student. So you are wrestling mother for 6 months, learning the letters, going through them, being able to take a look at the language and having it teach you. And this is why we were even discussing like the wrestle of the calendar, of what it looks like with a calendar, and how well, it's all about the wrestle, is because as you proceed, when you get into father's training and education, you realize that the calendar isn't near as important as it was in mother, because mother is training you and taming you, because the process of what Ken's bringing forth, which will make it perfectly clear, is that you become the calendar. It's not added, it's as it. And when you've gone through that whole process, and then when you tie it into the Hebrew wedding, of seeing how those parts of the feast days are actually a progression of our becoming from the betrothal to the marriage and the intimacy, once you become queen of heaven, once you've entered into that place, the calendar is no longer necessary, because you literally are walking as it, the frequency. And so it takes all the fight in the system of duality. What calendar? This one or this one? Is it lunar? Is it solar? Is it the Enochian? Is it the Qumran community? Do we follow with the moon? Do we have the first Passover, second Passover? I mean, I'm at this point, I don't really want to have any more discussions about the flipping calendar. I really don't. I've heard so many sides that it gives me a headache, because seeing it from a different level is like, there comes a point where you just don't need it anymore. And that is hard for people to see that. But if they're still in mother, they wouldn't see it. They would hear and they would be saying, well, that's blasphemy. You're supposed to keep the feast days, right? And you're supposed to keep the Sabbath on a certain day. But yet there's people that say it's a rotating Sabbath. So either it is or it isn't. There's always going to be different perspectives. I'm right, you're wrong. No, I'm right, you're wrong. Duality. And so even in the progression of the wise and the foolish versions, it's like, if you're saying a certain calendar is a certain way, then you're really enforcing yourself as service to self over others to say, you need to follow the pattern that I have found, instead of saying, let people wrestle with it. Let them wrestle to decide what the spirit is telling them. Are they going to follow the moon? Or are they going to follow the sun? Because there's really no one way that is right. It's an experience. That's all it is. You want to go through the lunar calendar for a while? We did. You want to go through the solar calendar for a while? We did.
It's just it seems like such a waste, because I think really what Mother teaches us is how you externally, how you interact with other people, how you respond, how you deal with people. And so that's the whole principle and point of Mother. And so the calendar often does the exact opposite of that. It causes you to, project what you, like you just said, project what you think on everyone else. Like you're going to try and control what everybody else does, or you think your way is better, or whatever, it's the opposite. It's the opposite of it.
But it provides wisdom for you, because what ends up happening after a while is that instead of being dogmatic about it, because really, I always say this, if you're going to punch somebody in the face, they're going to punch you back. So if you punch them with the words saying you're wrong, they're going to punch you back and say that you're wrong, instead of saying, how come you see it this way? Can you show me? Now you've taken the system of duality and you're trying to render it clear by meeting the other person and respecting their choices by listening to what they have to say. So why do you do the lunar calendar? I would like to understand that better. Instead of saying dogmatically, we're opposed, you're wrong and I'm right. Help me to understand you. There's wisdom in it. So Mother, at the beginning, again, it's the wrestle. You got to go through this whole process of duality of the right and the wrong, and the wrestling to see the vanity in it, the futileness of it. It's like, this isn't drawing us together. There has to be a better way. Well, of course there's a better way. When you get into Father's maturation process, you see the unity and oneness. And all of a sudden the calendar is no longer the point. It's where can we unify as one? The date does not matter. What matters is our unification into one brotherly love, where we see each other as ourselves and we're no longer trying to compare and judge. It's like, you have a very unique experience. Please tell me about your journey through the lunar calendar. I'll tell you about my journey through the solar calendar. Oh my gosh, now let's take a look and see what Father taught about this. The calendar doesn't matter because we become it. It's a frequency, because we've unified everything. We are no longer in dual systems. We're no longer comparing this or that, as it's all been rendered clear, because we've learned the journey and we're extracting wisdom out of this or that in the comparisons. And we can still come together and go, wow, what an amazing journey you've had. I can see why you went down that path. What did you find? Were you frustrated in areas? Did you find it was difficulty? Did you try the solar? Did you go over and see the difference on that? It's a completely different way of looking at it, to unify.